Welcome to the Liberty Without Compromise live stream with Dan and Dawna Wilson. The only flim-flam rebroadcast of Kootenai County, bringing you facts, evidence, and valid questions concerning our elected officials right here in Kootenai. The things that directly affect you, whether you know it or not, we're here to tell you about it and talk about it. Give us your questions and comments by typing them into the comment section on whichever platform you're watching. And if you're watching live, share this live stream to your channel. You can do that. Share it right now. Depending on the platform, it might be an arrow. It might look like an airplane.
I don't know what it looks like when you share it.
You just got to share it.
Yeah. Send it to a friend. Like it.
Share. For our podcast, you can listen and subscribe wherever you get your shows. And then, as always, you can learn more on our website, libertywithoutcompromise.com. Get yourself one of these t-shirts. Those are still available. And thank you to our sponsor tonight, Stella's Stogies. They're in Spirit Lake on Main Street. More than just cigars, they do events too. Oh, and if you go in and you mention them, you get 10% mentioned that you heard about them on the Liberty Without Compromise
Reminds
show.
me, I have forgotten to go up there this week.
You'll get 10% off.
Yeah, need to get up
Dan
there.
forgot to get up there, but
Need to get some
here now is your co-host, Dan Wilson.
Good evening. So glad you joined us. I feel like I need a cigar tonight.
Yeah?
I wish I had a burning stick right in these nicotine-stained fingers.
Not up here in my studio.
A little whiskey as well, just to kind of fight off the winter blues. Although we have had some sunshine. It's kind of nice.
The past couple days that's been good, and then I guess there's a cold snap coming in.
Seriously? Like how cold?
I don't know. I didn't check the weather again today. Maybe it changed.
Yeah, hopefully it'll change.
Because them chemtrails.
We're so glad you joined us on this second edition of Liberty Without Compromise 2025. All of our friends that are just tuning in right now, drop your questions and your comments in the little chat boxes. I've never done that. I need to try it out sometime. Otherwise, if you are brand new, we are talking about all things Liberty Without Compromise. We are based right out of the freest county of the freest state in the Union, Kootenai County, Idaho. And we are also broadcasting not only to the region, but across the fruited plains, as Rush Limbaugh used to say. And we're going to discuss things that are not only regional, but also national. And so one of the things that I like to talk about lately is these power player pastors in Kootenai County. Now, I ran for sheriff in 2024. I was not elected sheriff, but as things have unraveled, we have learned more and more behind the scenes exactly what we were up against. And it shocked me, to be honest with you, right at the beginning. I thought that Christians and conservatives would all welcome a Christian and a conservative with open arms, at least to listen to what they had to say. And what did I find? I found just the opposite. It almost makes you think that there's a Fed operation going on right here in Kootenai County, because I got to be honest with you, I've been a professing follower of Jesus Christ my entire life. I have never seen the amount of dysfunction by these churches that we're talking about, specifically the power player pastors, in these, 9 episodes so far? And we have more that are about ready to drop on all the ancillary actors, those that help prop up these pastors and help them continue what I call bad fruit, bad work, a wolf in sheep clothing type of nefarious thing. So get a chance, listen to episode 1 on wherever you get your podcast, to include Spotify, iHeart, Spreaker, iTunes. Where else am I missing?
Just all of them.
Yeah.
I
so
just say just
listen to episode 1.
Anywhere you get your podcast shows. Yep.
Episode 1. But do we have a little teaser on that episode?
Yeah, here it is. Without Compromise podcast, episode 9 in the Power Player Pastors of Kootenai County series. Listen to the taped conversation between Dan Wilson and an influential local pastor who, in his own words, exposes Sheriff Bob Norris and County Commissioner Bruce Matari.
You cannot be the only person, the only pastor, the only man of integrity in this county that understands what Bob and Bruce are up to. I'm shocked that I'm the only one out there right now that's willing to actually stand in that gap, to actually call out what they're doing, the bullying techniques, the dishonesty. Why am I the only man in this entire county that's doing this?
Oh, trust me. You're not the only man that does that, Dan.
Who's done it publicly?
So, brother, I have stood in that gap for years,
to call Bruce and Bob out
Oh, I've got on Bruce before.
publicly?
Trust me, that boy, I'll tell you what. When it comes to social media, Bruce is a wizard. He'll destroy
wizard.
whoever he can.
A wizard.
The problem that you
He's a
have
wizard.
is Bruce. That's the problem
Oh,
that you have.
I'm well aware of that. And then
So-
that's a very sad reflection that we have a man in the position that's supposed to stand in the gap for the people that has to be backed up and coached by a county commissioner. I mean, this is where we're at.
Listen to the full recorded phone call in episode 9 at libertywithoutcompromise.com or wherever you get your shows. I was hoping that would be the portion where he called Bob a big baby.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, this ties in with what are we doing right now with Liberty Without Compromise? It's an extension of the Idaho sheriff's race because there's a lot of unfinished business, especially right here in Kootenai County. And many of these people that we're talking about are on the short list for those that need to be dealt with and exposed as to what they are doing right here in the county. Now, that big baby that you just talked about was sworn in by the wizard, according to the pastor, the wizard, the social media wizard, DC Matari, happens to be a county commissioner and holds a special deputization from his former boss, Bob Norris. So Bob Norris was sworn in 2 days ago for his second term.
I think there
Let's
was
hope he
even a
actually
Bible.
does something this time.
There was a Bible.
Oh, he swore on a Bible?
I think it was a Bible.
I might burn him.
I know. I was a little worried for him there for a
The
minute.
habitual liar may want to open that Bible up and do a little brushing up about lying.
When you were introing tonight, one of the things you talked about was all of the corruption that was revealed as you were also simultaneously running your campaign, running against Bob Norris for the office of sheriff here in Kootenai County. And I spent even today, I'm not going to talk about what specifically, but diving into and researching just one piece of this puzzle for people who, a number of people who arrived on scene around the same time frame, and they seem to have their tentacles into local politics. And to imagine that not only were we running the race of our lives with every intention of winning, knowing that you were capable and qualified to do that, but then also what was going to be exposed in that process. And realizing where we sit now, we have got to continue forward because the time that we were given, you think if there is, I'm just saying if there is controlled opposition in politics in this area to control the outcome of elections or who our elected officials are, they have been at that for decades. You're just a guy that said, look, I don't have the political background, didn't have a big plan for running for office or getting into politics, loathed the idea actually, and then decided to take that step. And so you are one guy up against that system. And to think that in a handful of months that we'd be able to not only win, but expose all of that is just not
we're
plausible.
not going to expose anything of any notoriety for those that are currently involved in politics. They don't care. They're part of the entire big system. We're going to wake up by bringing you the receipts, and you can come to your own conclusion if you're here in Kootenai County as to who all these players are. Now, you want to hear over and over again that we live in a very conservative, safe county. Here's the reality. We have a lot of people that have moved in, and a lot of those people are not here for the good of the county. And they'll claim they are. They'll go to all the KCRCC meetings and they'll vote supposedly conservative, but they aren't. And they are actors, and we are going to continue to expose them. And look, I'm going to get a lot of hate for this because I know that Dan Gookin is, kind of an enemy of the KCRCC. I had a couple conversations with him in passing, but Dan, I understand kind of where you've been coming from when it comes to fighting the Brent Reagan, the KCRCC machine. And the more we're getting into it, the more I think those in Kootenai County that truly care about liberty better start paying attention, because the enemy is inside the gates, period. And by the way, this doesn't just stop right here in Kootenai County. It extends in each and every county throughout this country, all the way over into eastern Washington, into Spokane, into southern Idaho, into Oregon, all the way west to to Montana, across the entire country. This is going on in your own communities, and to vote for somebody just because they say the right thing without holding them to a test is complete lunacy. And it further shows that people really aren't liberty minded just because they get a little flyer that tells them mark the R.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the reason, another important thing that you just touched on was the reason that this matters outside of Kootenai County. As you think about the donations that are coming from Southern Idaho, from California, coming from out of state, people with interests in our area that are donating to newly formed political action committees.
Yeah.
They've been doing it since 2016 and prior. That money is coming in from elsewhere. It's a trend that's been happening. So that is why this message matters beyond why it's important to share. We have listeners in Hawaii who have been ardent supporters of the campaign and Liberty Without Compromise, wearing the shirts and the hats on the beach.
Yeah. There is a representative a former representative, Scott Herndon, just north of us here in Kootenai County. And I think that maybe, perhaps, I don't know him, have never met him. I've only followed him really on Twitter or X. But he kind of seems to be maybe, what do you call it, red-pilled? As far as what's going on really in the state and the people that are so-called conservatives. We're talking about the Dorothy Moons that are running the entire state now when it comes to the Republican Party. Again, Dorothy might be a nice person, never met her. But we're starting to see inconsistencies where they say one thing and do another. And we should not be putting up with this hypocrisy because, again, liberty is hanging by a thread. And I've watched my entire life, and even more so the past 10 years, the Uniparty, the Republicans and the Democrats, both behaving extremely horrible, violating the very principles of the founders in the Republic. And they all think it's okay when they're the ones in power, when they're the ones in the majority. So since we're super MAGA state now, according to all the publications, we're ultra super conservative. When are you guys going to actually fix things like the immigration? And I've seen that they've put in some potential legislation to make it illegal if they've gotten here illegally into the country, and Idaho can export them, similar to what Texas is doing. That's all good and fine, but there are other things that you probably should be doing in unison. If you haven't thought about it yet, representatives, you guys should be introducing bills to go after the NGOs that are violating our very laws and start making some extremely difficult penalties for these NGOs that are aiding and abetting the invasion of our country and the circumventing of our laws.
Thank you, Angela. Hi. A good evening to you too. Thanks for joining us. And that's a reminder that you can put your questions and comments right into the comment section on whichever platform you're watching, whether that's Facebook, YouTube, or over on X.
Yeah. So we're going to talk tonight about the Fedsurrection. We've had all of these FBI involved Fedsurrections around the country. We've had them even probably right here. And I was in a little bit of a Twitter exchange. Do we call it Twitter or X? X exchange.
Well, that's what's so funny. It just doesn't
and
flow.
I made some people probably a little upset because of my views on the Gun the Lane event that took place here in 2020.
Oh, were you getting in that that today on X?
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't real heated, but look, I just said, look, I'm going to try to quit saying
that's all right.
Look.
While you're thinking about not saying that anymore, that's a reminder to follow the Idaho Sheriff over on X. That platform has done really well, especially over the last year, without or not censoring.
Yeah.
And so that has been a great source of news and information. And Dan has continued to be a voice with exchanges there that I think you'll be interested in joining in on from time to time.
My personal view is that the FBI, the DOJ, is so entirely corrupt. And now that Donald J. Trump is going to be the next president-elect, does not mean that this ship is going to be fixed, if at all, and definitely not overnight. Now, look, I'm hoping that Kash Patel gets in there and kicks some ass. I'm glad to see good positive outcomes from Pete Hegseth. But the problem is, right here, right now, across the country, we have an out-of-control DOJ, more specifically the FBI, and I'm concerned because we're 5 days away from the inauguration. A lot can happen between now and then. Divine providence has most likely stayed us away from, to date, anything extremely terrible happening. And we all should be praying for our president and for all the leaders. But let's look a little bit at history to find out what has gone on in this country in just the past several years. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of 9/11. I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of the Oklahoma City bombing or the JFK assassination. We all have read the articles. We've done our own digging. We know that our government lies to us. We know that there's far more at hand to those events than what we currently publicly are being told. But I want to draw your attention right now, my fellow friends, my fellow Americans who, again, are practicing liberty without compromise. We do not advocate for any kind of unlawful activity. Now, I was many times attempted to be set up when I was in the campaign because I was so popular with the idea of this liberty, life, liberty, property as given to us under God, under natural law. But people would come up and they'd say publicly, well, are you going to, in essence, go to arms with the federal government with 3-letter agencies? And I continually said what? Over and over again. No, that's not what we do. We have the foundation, not only from the United States Constitution, but our own states and our own counties, to do the fighting that we need to through lawfare and other means that are nonviolent. But I want to encourage you to be very, very careful with your alliances and with whatever groups you are associated with right now. Understand that the majority of the groups you are in are infiltrated by federal agents. And we might have a couple federal agents even in some of the Kootenai regional or Kootenai Central Committee type of ancillary, there I use that word the second time tonight, but accessory groups.
Well, and the more I learn, the more I realize they're in your, this is just to beware. They're in your political action committees. They're in coalitions, the different things
they're
that are
advising
formed,
the sheriff.
That are seem to be conservative organizations going after things that are like-minded with what you'd want in a place where you want to be able to raise your children. And they're there. They are there.
So going back to 2020, that year was full of outrageous violations of our rights. And many of you out there fought it. But unfortunately, the vast majority of you went along with it. And part of the consequences, as we have seen, is out of control. Federal Bureau of Investigations goes back even to prior to Trump being elected in 2016, when the FBI started spying on him illegally all the way back when he was a candidate. Now, in 2020, we had COVID. We had the summer of love. We had cities burning to the ground. We had people that were denied to be with their loved ones over this COVID scam. People that were being killed in hospitals, and yet you could burn cities down because you're practicing your First Amendment rights. Now, in 2020, the FBI does what it does very, very well. It finds vulnerable, mentally disturbed individuals, and it entraps them. It coaxes them into actions and gives them the means and the funding and the associates. And so we have in 2020, we have the Governor Whitmer from Michigan, that whole concocted event by the FBI where a group of men, I think they were the Wolverine militia, something to that ilk, about 20 individuals that were going to plot a kidnapping of the governor and then a bombing. And once you know, as time has gone on, that I believe over 12 or 13 of the 20 were actual FBI agents and or confidential human sources. And the individuals that they charged with these crimes were, from my understanding, mentally unstable to begin with. This is what your FBI does in order to advance itself. Now, the special agent in charge of that operation, a few months after this event took place in October 2020, went and ran the field operations for DC during the January 6th event. So we're going to play a little bit of, this guy's kind of funny to watch, but here's one of the defendants from the Whitmer kidnap plot. Listen to what he has to say on Twitter here, and it's 4 minutes. We may not listen to the whole thing, but you'll get the gist.
There's sign here, Whitmer kidnap plot victim. Wait, you were one of them?
Yes, sir.
You were one of the ones?
I've talked to you for a very long time.
Real quick, I'm going to go back to Miranda, but tell me real quick, we only got about 20 seconds.
All right.
You're one of the ones that got arrested for the plot?
Yes, sir. Eric
your name?
Molitor. I'm Eric Molitor.
Tell me about it, real quick.
Real quick. I don't even know where to start.
FBI infiltrated, basically set it up. Am I right?
The FBI set everything up. They drove people. They paid for everything. They wrote the script. Governor Whitmer herself opened her scheduling book and decided with the FBI and state police when to be the best time for the daytime ride, the nighttime ride. Then they dupe people into it. They even have we even have proof of them telling people, get as many people in the trucks as possible and don't tell them what you're doing until they're already on the road. Yep, it was 100% set up, and Governor Whitmer, and if they can do it to nobody like me, they will come after everybody else.
So let me ask your part in this without getting, I don't know if you're still going through the legal battles on it.
Acquitted, man.
Acquitted. So acquitted. So this is one of those things. She's still out there pushing this as if it was a legitimate thing, that there was a kidnap plot against her that she set up with the FBI. So walk me through what actually happened that night.
Oh my gosh, man. So I didn't go on what's known as the nighttime ride. I was duped into the daytime ride. And oh my gosh, again, there's so much that goes into it. Anyways, I had set up a civil defense force for my area in Wexford, Cadillac City, because Antifa and BLM was coming up there. Through this process, I had met Adam Fox, who lived down here in Grand Rapids, actually. After a while, he got me a job in private security, which was really awesome. I thought this dude was really, really cool. And he actually is a good guy, by the way. The FBI, the government has lied about this man who's still in prison. Anyways, got a hold of me and asked me if I wanted to go for a ride. I asked, yeah, you know, what do you have in mind? I'm thinking it's this good guy shit that we got going on. Oh, sorry,
Stuff.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
But yeah, good guy stuff that we had going on, you know, looking for these vans that the police were telling us, you know, yeah, they're coming. This is what they're driving. Anyways, so that's what I thought we were doing. Nothing was said about Governor Whitmer or anything like that. So anyways, we get him and Dan Chappell, the original FBI informant there, another lying person right there. He came up to pick me up, so him and Adam Fox. We get all the way up to Elk Rapids, which was an hour away from my house. Nothing was talked about. It was a truck with 3 men. We talked about women, alcohol, guns, like Americans do, you know. And anyways, we get up to Elk Rapids, and they said her cottage. I'm still not putting it together. You know, I'm thinking maybe the Antifa or BLM is trying to hold up it at a private residence instead of doing these hotels and motels that we heard about.
You guys were more doing security or what?
I thought that we were. When we got up there, and I'm already in a truck with people 100 miles away from my house, then they started talking about Whitmer's cottage. And right there, dude, like my heart sunk. I didn't know if I was going to make it out of that situation alive.
So,
I had no idea what was going on.
This goes on
anyways,
for
I took
a little longer, but that's just one example of one of the victims of this setup, this entrapment. One of the FBI agents also involved with this happened to be a wife abuser. So he beat up his wife and ended up losing his status at the FBI. So I don't recall if they yanked his badge or special agent or what, but that's just one example in 2020. Now, a few months later, again, 2.5 months at the Capitol, you have this so-called insurrection that took place. It wasn't an insurrection. Were there violent actions there? Yes. Were there acts of vandalism? Yes. Property destruction? Yes. However, we know by Chris Wray, who recently testified before Congress, that they had at least 25 actors inside there. FBI operatives inside that event. When you combine that with the actions that they've shown on video over and over again of DC police escorting, or Capitol Police rather, escorting people inside the building, giving them access, opening doors, we know that this whole thing was another massive setup by the FBI, and it ushered in a period of 4 years where many Americans were denied their due process, denied their Sixth Amendment rights. And there were people okay with this because, well, how dare somebody attack our Capitol? It was equated to the Holocaust and to 9/11.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is absurd. But I'm guessing there was far more than 26 agents that were there. There was probably other 3-letter agencies, DHS, for example. We know that They infiltrate into groups over and over again. And in Kootenai County, it's happening right here. So if you're part of a militia, I'm not a part of one. I don't trust any of those guys in there because I'm certain they're all feds. And I know that I've had this argument back and forth, but my advice would be do not belong to organizations that are anti-government because you are being monitored and you are being set up. Now, let's talk about Kootenai County right now. Hopefully, in a couple days, those individuals that were not producing violent acts at J6 are going to be pardoned. And I hope some of them actually get financial compensation for their due process being violated. In Kootenai County in 2022, we had an event where there was a pride event down in the Coeur d'Alene Park, and a group called the Patriot Front was intercepted on their way down in a Ryder or a U-Haul box van, where there was about 30 individuals in the back of this cargo area with helmets and shields and sticks, and they were arrested and they were charged with, I believe, intent to commit a riot. I may have that wrong. I asked Bob Norris, sheriff at that time, why he did not run a parallel investigation, because most people I know, and with all due respect to some of my colleagues who know some of these members and believe that they're all legit, I'm still not convinced. Just because the head of the organization says that they're all organic dudes, I don't buy it. I believe that there's confidential human sources in there. And the reason I say this is because the FBI did whatever they could through the Assistant U.S. Attorney's Office, Tracy Whalen, to get a search warrant for a state crime not involving federal crime or violating federal statute. One FBI agent resigned and was replaced because he refused to go along with this search warrant that was eventually executed. Several of the cases were thrown out because of prosecutorial misconduct, including a failure to provide discovery when the Coeur d'Alene police, without they've shown any proof that there was a search warrant, allowed the feds, the FBI, to gather telephones, cell phones of these defendants. We don't know how many of the 30 were legitimate men that were, there to be no different than BLM or Antifa or whatever else. I don't condone any violence whatsoever that's not covered in the First Amendment. But I want to know how many of those were feds. How many of them were confidential human sources? How many of those had dead baby birth certificate names? What does that mean? That's a thing where you have some baby that was born, given a birth certificate, it doesn't live, but that birth certificate survives. And actors who want to mask their true identities can capture these to become the person that's deceased. Bob Norris, Mr. Constitutional Sheriff, refused and said that he had no ability to do any kind of parallel investigation because as sheriff, it was out of his jurisdiction. Mm-hmm. Now I got a question. It's a little sidebar.
I should have pulled up we have video evidence of you. Yeah. Can't hear it, but of you approaching Sheriff Norris and asking him that question.
Bob Norris was adamant that he could do nothing because it wasn't his jurisdiction. So I have to ask, as this little sidebar, everybody's whipped up right now about this Emergency Management Act, the ability of the governor to declare an emergency and to order evacuations. And the sheriff has now decided that he's going to come out, which, bravo, Bob.
I was late on my sound effects.
I don't know why it took you that long to make that statement, but you and DC Matari. However, the reality of it is that, Bob, how in the world are you going to prohibit people in Coeur d'Alene or Post Falls from being arrested for not following a mandatory evacuation? After all, according to what you said about the Patriot Front, it's not in your jurisdiction.
That has been exactly my point, is he has been coasting through for 4 years and been allowed to have supporters prop him up saying he has a proven track record, proven
a lot
success.
of extremely stupid
and
people.
I said exactly this to you. The only thing he's proven when he comes out, makes the statement, nobody's going to be removed from their homes. I'll see to it, whatever the full statement is. I said, the only thing he has a proven track record for is when he had a chance to do something.
To do something
and
to
to
really
dig if there's a federal operation happening. He says that's not my jurisdiction.
Can't do it.
And neither is this.
Yeah.
Right.
So let me ask you, Bob, when can you, interject yourself into any kind of an event? Ask him that question. And all you KCRCC guys, the ones that went to all of the pachyderms and the Reagan Republicans, you follow the same crowd over and over again. Your worship of Bob Norris and Bruce Matari. When are you guys going to grow up and admit that the guy's a fraud? Now, I'm a little bit animated tonight because my bullshit meter is all the way up. I've had enough of it. And I've had enough of Paul Van Noy coming out and he's grandstanding again on this issue. Paul Van Noy, where were you 4 years ago or 5 years ago when this was an issue? Why are you just now concerned about the fact that a governor under a lawful order can tell people to vacate their place? Now, again, a good moral sheriff would say, okay, I'm not going to force any resident out of their own property. They can protect it, but here are the consequences. If you choose not to go, nobody's coming to save you. And number two, you better stay on your own property because you might be misidentified as a looter or other criminal, and there could be consequences. Okay, fine. So why all the concern all of a sudden, Paul Van Noy, Pastor Paul of Candlelight? What's all the concern? What's all the concern, Bob? You've had 4 freaking years, now it's on 5, to go through all these policies. It's not like this is a brand new policy. So folks, watch what they're doing. Now, Bob Norris got his nuts extremely out of joint. I'm sidetracking just for a second here again.
Like almonds? So
they had an elected meeting today. And Norris got, like he always does, like the little baby, as Pastor Tim calls him. He was upset because
a big baby.
Leslie Duncan, county commissioner, right before Christmas, had her own town hall as an elected official on license plate reader technology. And Bob was offended by that. And he wants to make it clear that in the future, Leslie, since you guys are all working on the same team, Leslie, that, you need to run it before him, Leslie, before you get to hold your own town hall. So, all right, off that soapbox, back to the regularly scheduled topic at hand. Patriot Front was never addressed by Bob Norris. He completely let one slide. A big investigator from Los Angeles apparently doesn't understand the law in his jurisdiction. I guess that's what happens when you're a lieutenant as a paper pusher for Homeland Security.
And had there been people in that group that were coerced, just a hypothetical scenario with the Patriot Front, had there been people locally who had been coerced into that group, kind of similarly to the guy we just heard with the Whitmer story. He's like, I was working private security. My buddy asked me to go on a ride. I don't even know what we're doing. That would have been Bob Norris's prime opportunity to find out what's really going on and protect.
And why is the
Kootenai
assistant
County.
U.S. attorney, Tracy Whalen, so involved in this? This is overreach of the federal government. And we know because the judge in several occasions threw these cases out because of the misconduct. Somebody tell me why the FBI was allowed any jurisdiction. As sheriff, I probably would have gone in there and told them, pound sand, you're not coming into this county. You have no business prosecuting this. But again, the professional lawmen just let it happen. Now let's talk about the last thing.
Yeah.
This
I
has
know where
made
you're going with
people
this.
really, really, really upset.
Oh, no.
It's 2020.
Yeah.
It's early in 2020. I can say midway through the year. COVID's in full blow. Everything's in lockdown. You have the riots going on in Seattle and in Portland and in Minnesota, all over the country. And somebody gets wind. Now, I was still a patrolman at this time for a small agency in Eastern Washington, greater Spokane area. And the city of Spokane was definitely dealing with riots. In fact, our agency was sending resources, some of our riot gear, some of our impact weapons and and some gas supplies. We were sending those to the city. We did not participate. Maybe a couple of our guys did. I don't recall. But nothing was happening anywhere in the area that we were at, which is a little further to the east near state line of Idaho. It wasn't happening in the Spokane Valley. It wasn't happening in Cheney. It wasn't happening in Liberty Lake. It just happened in downtown Spokane. But somewhere, somebody gets word that a bunch of B or C string Antifa and BLM are on their way from the west side.
I wonder who got
to
word.
Coeur d'Alene.
I wonder who got word and then was spreading it in Facebook chat.
The one that was also on his knee.
Wonder who it was.
So
one knee down.
We've tried to get the entire timeline. I don't have it entirely, but it goes something like this. Word is that there's going to be these protesters showing up and they're putting bricks on the corners, doing all the stuff that we saw in the big cities. And so the word went out through Facebook, calling all patriots, all hands on deck. They're coming to the Coeur d'Alene area and we have to be ready. Now, small disclaimer, anybody that knows me knows that I believe in everybody's right to protect their property and to protect their life, regardless of who you are. You don't have to allow somebody to destroy your property or your person. I take that very seriously. And those that remember my wish to have a posse, great opportunity for events that are like this, that are supposedly coming the way of Coeur d'Alene, to get a posse ready of good people.
Directed by the sheriff and a lawful
chief law enforcement officer of the county.
Yes.
So there's a bunch of patriots, and I believe the people that showed up were good people. I believe there are people that I would sit and drink coffee, smoke cigar, and have great conversation with. Unfortunately, my belief is, and I'll explain this, is this was a Fed setup for good people right here in Cooney County. Now, I didn't talk about this a lot during the campaign because I was advised by some folks that it would greatly upset people to hear this. So at this point, I don't care, but I'm going to be truthful. So you have a couple problems with this scenario. One is, being in law enforcement, I knew when I was in law enforcement, I knew how things work. And I can guarantee you that if there were a credible threat coming to Coeur d'Alene, you would have saw Coeur d'Alene PD, Cooney County Sheriff's Office, Post Falls PD. You'd have seen those agencies getting together with their riot squads in order to maintain the peace and to protect property and life. None of that ever took place. Patriots lined up. My understanding is Coeur d'Alene PD stood down. They stood in the background. And for several days, people from every walk of life with every kind of experience or inexperience with their firearms displayed their firearms and protected the city from any kind of violence. Problem. We have fusion centers, right? In Spokane. We have a fusion center. That intel never made it through anything that I was ever given, and I was on what was called Rig 9, where we got all the regional intel. None of that ever came to fruition. And you have all of these patriots down there on the front lines, and who shows up? Who shows up to this event? Candidate Bob Norris and soon to be DC Matari County Commissioner Bruce Matari. And they were there during this event. In fact, Norris likes to brag that he had received right before that the primary nomination for Republican sheriff candidate for the county. And a reporter were calling him from all over, and they basically said, what do you think of this? It's irresponsible for you to be down there. And he said, well, I think it was the safest place in the country to be. And he alludes to the fact that, he was for it, but he wasn't really for it, but kind of for it. You need to listen to how many times he talks about where he comes right up to that razor edge without going over, making people that aren't paying attention believe that he was pro the Patriots showing up versus no, he was anti the Patriots showing up. but both those actors happened to be there. Remember, Bob Norris worked at a fusion center in Los Angeles for several years prior to coming up to Kootenai County. He worked with Homeland Security. He says that he handled resources like the FBI, the CIA, the Mossad, and Shin Bet. And he shows up at this event. What do I think really was going on? Well, I'm glad you asked.
North Idaho News probably knew it was going to be a good.
Well, I think he was still
Media up.
fixing septic tanks over on the west side. I don't think he quite moved over then. He was still putting in faulty.
Hadn't launched North Idaho News yet to help
Wonder
his
if
good old buddy.
Wonder if his lawsuit's been resolved yet. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
So coming back to the real issue, you have patriots for several days that were ripe for Homeland Security surveillance and capturing. So how many patriots down there during that time were being photographed, videoed, their vehicles and license plates were being recorded, cell phones were being pinged, identifying who the potential problem people in the county would be if there ever is an event. And people are very, very angry when they hear me say this because they don't want to admit to themselves that it's possible that they were planning on doing a good thing and were doing a good thing, but it was a setup.
We've sat across from people where you suggest that as just walk through this with me. Let's talk about what's logical and reasonable, why this possibly could have been allowed to occur, and see the color drop from somebody's face. So the reaction isn't always anger, but it's good people who just never even thought, it never entertained that idea. And then it strikes that bit of fear.
And Bob and Bruce happened to be there. You got Bruce Matari from DC Matari as I call him. And you have Bob Norris. They weren't there by accident. And they weren't there by happenstance. Start putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And as the months go by, hopefully more of this will become more and more evident as to what has really been going on up here in Kootenai County. Now, why do I say all this? Well, right after that event, there was an appreciation banquet that was held sometime later. And another great opportunity to identify people again, facial recognition, all of that. I'm saying this because I want fellow Americans to survive this corrupt form of government that we have. It's indisputable. The FBI, the DOJ, they have been doing horrible things to the American people for many, many years. I'm hoping that Trump can truly, I'd like to see him smash the FBI into 1 million pieces, 100 million pieces. And the DOJ to be turned back to what its primary mission should be, which is providing justice. I want my friends, fellow patriots, if you believe in liberty without compromise, be smart about who you're associating with, what is being discussed in those meetings, what you're saying publicly, what kind of a list are you being put on, and what happens, what does it look like when the deep state takes over an area? Has the deep state already taken over in Kootenai County? Are they on the verge? Or am I just full of hot air and speculation that is sensational?
I think, unfortunately, what we're finding is you have more and more people having to stand on their own, because as soon as even joining conservative organizations, coalitions, nonprofits of any kind, you're finding that that's where the wheeling and dealing is happening, and you're needing to compromise. Yeah. And so people running for office, think about the difficulty of getting any kind of traction in your campaign. If you say, look, I'm not going to compromise by rubbing elbows with this person here and there. But in terms of even your own safety, when you say, I want to be active, I want to be involved, we're unfortunately in a place where you really cannot, you have to second guess any kind of group that you're becoming a part of, whether they're women's liberty-minded groups or the Republican Party, KCRCC, and then all the shoot-offs of that, because we don't know who the people really are who are in.
And you don't know some of the people that have come from out of state, whether it's Washington,
Yes.
California, wherever. If you really don't know their background, how do you know that they're not compromised? Look, the FBI, Homeland Security, all these federal agencies have for years been getting the goods on people and blackmailing them. You think that I'm wrong? Look at Congress. Look at all of your representatives that you think are one way, and then you see them do these insane votes opposite of what you've always known them to do and believe. That is because, as Jesse Kelly tweeted about today, they've got these people with their cross-dressing midgets, and their compromising photos. They've got those on just about everybody, and that's what's destroying the republic. So in conclusion,
and they go to church and they quote scripture,
and they're especially embedded in the churches. You
gotta watch out. Yes,
especially embedded in the churches, no doubt about it. And I'm looking forward to my continual exposing along with you on all the things we found. We're not going to come out and ever say absolutely for a fact this is a fact if we don't know it, but I believe in the people that are around here have common sense, and they have the spirit, and they can look at the evidence and come to their own conclusion. But I'm telling you, the KCRCC is infiltrated with people that are not who they seem to be. Mm-hmm. So talking about that, let's talk about government a little bit. Now, elitism has taken over politics, not only at the national level, but at the state and the local. And we've heard over and over again, why did everybody love Trump so much? I would ask this question when I'm out doing my town halls. I even asked this at a KCRCC event. Why does everybody love Trump? And they went on, because he's a disruptor, because he's a businessman, because, he takes on the deep state, because he calls people names, and because he ridicules people, or, whatever it was, they liked him. And yet, when I attempted to draw parallels between myself and Trump, these Trump worshipers all of a sudden started saying, well, it's not the same because you weren't a celebrity, you weren't a billionaire, and on and on. And what it is it's elitism at a local level. It doesn't happen just at a federal. Look, Trump has spent the past year, even after, well, you could say 4 years, having been the former president, he still was having to fight people in the Republican Party, people in the Democratic and the Socialist, and every form of government and prosecutors. And everybody coming against him. So it does happen. There's elites. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the danger of allowing these elites to continue to operate our country, not only at a local level, but at a national level as well. Pete Hegseth, I think we have a video of this and I want to play. Here's something that transpired this week when he was before the Senate hearing on his position for potential SecDef. I want you just to listen to this, and then we're going to talk about it a little more.
And then when we start talking about qualifications for if you're qualified for it, could the chairman tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense? Mr. Chairman, could you tell me what the qualifications are for the Secretary of Defense?
I'd be happy for
I'll read it
for you to do that. Yeah.
Let me read it for you, because I
was getting some advice from my second in command.
Yeah, but I'm just making a point, because there's a lot about qualifications. And I think it's so hypocritical of senators, especially on the other side of the aisle, be talking about his qualifications, not going to lead the secretary or be the Secretary of Defense, and yet your qualifications aren't any better. You guys aren't any more qualified to be the senator than I'm qualified to be the senator, except we're lucky enough to be here. But let me read you what the qualifications of the Secretary of Defense is, because I Googled it and went through a lot of different sites, and really it's hard to see. But in general, the U.S. Secretary of Defense position is filled by a civilian. That's it.
Yeah. So we find this argument quite a bit, where people have become enamored with career politicians, career government employees. They forget that our government was wisely set up by the founders, by the framers, so that the average man could have a shot. Now, I'm not going to argue and say that you can be a complete idiot and be a part of.
Well, I think that unfortunately that argument dissolves to that lowest common denominator, is people think that that's what you're advocating for, that it could just be any average Joe Schmo who, whereas there are important qualifications.
We had a 23-year-old kid that ran for sheriff.
Yes.
Sorry. And he had the lawful right to do it.
He did.
But, you know, what experience did he have at all? None. Now, I was told over and over again, no experience, unqualified. And the people that said that were dead wrong. Similar to Pete, you want civilians in these oversights. We're going to talk here in a second about Doug Trobel down in Ada County, who was a career lawman that faced similar blowback. And he had, decades on me for law enforcement, but even they are elitists down there in Boise as well, in Ada County. But your elected representatives have to be from among you. The government runs at the consent of the governed. We want people with common sense and the ability to do something. We have a new county commissioner, Mark Eberline, who was a former county commissioner back in 2018, was reelected now. Hearts go out to him and his family, by the way, this week. But Mark was a self-made man. Construction, casework contractor, many other businesses that he's been involved with. Very smart individual who is more than capable of being a county commissioner that's in charge of, however, $100 million budget or whatever it's now blown up to be. But there is no qualification of having to have an MBA in business or having to have a law enforcement certification in order to be the sheriff. So for all of you elites out there, and you know who you are, just because you're there now, and just because you think that you're more qualified than somebody that is lesser than you education-wise or certification, you need to check yourself. The reason this country is in the trouble that it's in is because we have had career politicians and career government workers that have totally screwed this country up, not only at a federal level, and we're talking about the aides to the congressmen who really screw things up. We're also talking about locally here as well. I think it's funny that the people that are pro Pete, they're pro Gabby, pro Bondi, all Cash Patel, they're all singing the praises of these guys coming in and being the disruptors, and they don't care about their so-called experience related to having ever done that job.
Right.
And at one point, Bondi today, I was listening, they were saying, well, until I get in, I'm not going to know those things. Cooney County had an elitist problem here. You KCRCC people are part of that problem, and I'm going to call you out again. Because in your mind, rather than to adhere to the Constitution and to Republican ideals as far as a representative from among the people, you wanted to continue the lie over and over and over again that I didn't have 30 years of law enforcement experience as a lieutenant. Well, as I alluded to earlier, this guy that has all the experience is a big fat dud when it comes to doing things that are important according to you constitutional people. We're in the problem that we're in right now because we have career politicians, career government workers that are taking over the reins and are continuing to hold the reins, and we got to change that. Now, there's talk in the state of Idaho, probably because of guys like me, where they want to disregard the qualifications under statute to be a sheriff of being 21, a citizen of the United States, and having resided in the county for at least 1 year. Doug Trobel, who ran for sheriff of Ada County at the same time as I did, he had been with the sheriff's office for many years before, was actually supposed to be the appointed sheriff after a vacation of the last sheriff. Started out in San Diego, Southern California, came up here, very constitutional-minded guy, Matt Clifford, current Republican, very similar to Bob Norris, refused to debate because of these elites. I can't tell you how much I hate elites. That goes for any kind of attitude from this Sheriff Matt Clifford. How dare you, Clifford, think you're so special that you don't have to debate another opponent? You arrogant jackass. And I'll say the same thing about Bob Norris. Bob Norris is either an extremely insecure, scared individual, or he's a jackass as well, because he refused to debate me because he knew I'd mop the floor with him. But there is a move now by the Idaho Sheriff Association to make it that you no longer can be a sheriff if you've met those 3 previous requirements. You now must be post-certified. Doug wrote an op-ed in the Idaho Dispatch, December 6, 2024. I'm going to read a little bit from it. Doug is not running again for sheriff, but he starts out saying, as of 2022, the sheriff of King County, Washington, which is Seattle, is no longer elected. The position is now appointed. As such, it should no longer be called sheriff. It should be called the county police chief. The change from elected to appointment transferred the office to a subordinate of department of county government like the Parks Department or Sewer Department. The King County Sheriff wears the title in name only without a mandate of the people. She has no autonomy to unilaterally step into Seattle to defend the people from crime or interpose on behalf of the citizens from government overreach. This is a dangerous precedent for freedom. He goes on to say, in Idaho, a move that will weaken the office of sheriff comes from where one would least expect, the Idaho Sheriff's Association. The ISA took its first swing in 2019 at lobbying to change the requirements sent by Idaho Code to be a candidate for sheriff. Holding a current Idaho post, which is the police officer standard and training certification, is one of the suggested hurdles. This is a real fascinating article. I'm going to try to see if we can't, let's send this link out so people can download it. I did
put the link to the article right here in the comments section on Facebook and YouTube, so you can click on that and read it in its entirety.
I listened to Matt Clifford on a podcast not too long ago, and he was, again, in his elitism, because, they're better than all of us, was talking about sheriffs who were unqualified and had some criminal backgrounds and activities, and they just should not be able to be elected. Well, excuse me, Clifford, but here's the deal. The people get to be the say on who they do and don't want to be sheriff. I know this one firsthand. We do not need a career cop who thinks that he's elite and the only one that is worthy of holding the position to tell people that, you know what, this is something that cops should be, given the responsibility to oversee. The sheriff is supposed to oversee law enforcement. You want a citizen from among the people to step in to hold law enforcement accountable. And again, some 23-year-old kid, if people could probably make the argument that I'm being elitist now, but a 23-year-old kid that has no life experience would not be somebody that you would want in that position. And I think that the people would not vote for him. But county commissioners, if you have no previous business experience, then why isn't there a law saying unless you've shown the ability to have X amount of years under your belt running successful companies that you aren't qualified? Maybe we could say the same thing about mayors and city council too while we're at it. Mm-hmm. Dangerous precedent that's being set. And I hope to God that there are reasonable legislators who haven't drunk the entire Republican Kool-Aid that will listen to this extremely poor advice from those that would change the importance of the office of the sheriff. You do not want any restrictions. You let the people be the decider on that. No different than the president. I am sick and tired of this argument. You let Barack Obama, for crying out loud, be the president of the United States. You want to talk about somebody that had zero qualifications for the most highest office, and he got elected not once, but twice? So, anyway.
We knew that one was coming. We knew it was coming, that they were going to push toward that here in our state, because the qualifications were what they were. But it is also a way to make certain that a guy like you can't have a second run at it. They do not want to deal with that kind of opposition.
Because guys like me are disruptors and will go in and clean house and do righteous things.
And we've extended our hour here.
Yeah, I think we should probably get close. I know these are passionate subjects, and we have been getting messages saying, "Hey, when are you going to?"
Thing,
you know. So I do want to start a trend here at Liberty Without Compromise weekly when I remember to, and that is I want to leave the listeners or the viewers, I guess if you're watching this live right now, listener, if you're listening later on in the podcast, a quote from the founder that I find fascinating, encouraging, uplifting as we continue to promote Liberty Without Compromise. Listen to the words of Samuel Adams, who says, if you can throw that slide up there. Samuel Adams, do you got that ready?
I do.
All right, awesome. Samuel Adams, nil desperandum, never despair. That is a motto for you and me. All are not dead, and where there is a spark of patriotic fire, we will rekindle it. And with that, I think it's time that we say good night for this week, but we will be back next week.
We will.
And in between on social media chatting.
Wednesday night, 7 p.m. And going to have another podcast dropping soon as well. We want to thank our sponsor tonight. That is Stella's Stogies. I'm going to share the screen here. I got to talk and do stuff at the same time. Stella's Stogies. They're more than just cigars. Remember, they've got gifts in their shop there. They're on Main Street in
Spirit Lake.
They also do events, so if you want to really show up your family and friends for events, don't bring in the coffee truck. Well, bring in the coffee truck too, but Stella's Stogies does events.
And we have been in an event with Stella's Stogies, and it was phenomenal.
A class act. A class act. Also, receive 10% off your purchase there at Stella's by mentioning that you heard about them here on the Liberty Without Compromise live stream broadcast. Learn more at stellasstogies.com.
Follow me on X, the Idaho Sheriff. For those who've been praying for Ron and Todd, Todd is doing well. Ron got some encouraging news today, but keep praying for both these guys. They can use your support. I know they'll appreciate it. I appreciate it as well.
Thank you for joining us for the Liberty Without Compromise live stream broadcast. And if you're listening back on our podcast, listen live Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on Facebook, YouTube, or X. Learn more at libertywithoutcompromise.com. And for our podcast, you can listen and subscribe wherever you get your shows.
Now, remember to be strong and of good courage. We didn't descend from fearful men, but men who understood the times. They acted accordingly, and they pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor. Now it's up to us to spark that liberty back in. Good night, folks.
Good night.